is called I Think I Want to Write My Story. You'll notice there's a question mark and an exclamation point. That's because some of you are probably here wondering and questioning if it's something you want to do, and others of you likely know it's something you want to do and you are just here to learn. So we want to raise awareness that there's probably a mixture of both of that in this workshop, and we're excited about that. As Kathleen shared, I'm Annie Hallsten Narayan. I am a writer. I'm a personal historian, so I work with people to essentially document their stories, their life stories, to ensure that they're passed down for future generations. I'm a ghostwriter, essentially. And this is my colleague, Monica, and you'll hear both of our stories a little bit later on. All right. So this workshop is really designed for anyone in the adoption constellation who's considering writing their story, but you're not really sure where to start. Again, as I said, some of you may be even questioning if it's something you want to do. Some of you may be sure, but you're not really quite sure how you want to do it. We want to acknowledge that together, Monica and I are an adoptee, a birth mom, and an adoptive mom. It's a unique situation because her and I speak together a lot. We work together a lot. And we're really proud of the fact that our collaboration is something that we can really, we come from all perspectives and different places in the constellation. And so I think that's a unique perspective that we offer in working together. What we would love to do right now, we kind of want to hear where you're all from, who you are, and why you're here. So if you wouldn't mind, please put in the chat your name, where you're from, your role in the constellation, and then put either a question mark or an exclamation point. Are you here wondering if this is something you want to do, or are you here, this is something you know you want to do and you just want to understand the direction? So again, your name, where you're from, your role in the constellation, and then whether or not, just type a question mark or an exclamation point. We'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Please type that into the chat. Okay, we have a birth mom, Sharon from Springfield, Missouri, with an exclamation point. Great, welcome. We're excited to have you here. Sarah, Michigan, and her country adopted person from Korea. Okay. Welcome, Sarah. Lots of exclamation points. Okay, Jackie from California. Jackie, type where you're from. Monica and I are both from California also. An adoptee question mark. Oh, we have an Alaskan living in DC. Rachel is an adoptee. Near Yosemite, wonderful. Okay, so yeah, I see some question marks. We see some exclamation points. That's good. It's good for us to kind of see where everyone is coming from. So welcome. We're really excited to have you here today. All right, let's look at our learning outcomes. So at the end of this workshop today, you will be able to articulate why you want to write your story. You'll be able to select a method. How do you want to write your story? What does that look like to you? You'll create a self-care plan for the writing process, because that is something that you are absolutely going to need. And then you'll walk away with a set of best practices to help you as you get started. So the first thing, we did create a workbook, and Kathleen is going to put it in the slide in the chat. Since you likely won't have time to download it and print it out, just grab any piece of paper. We do have some reflection questions for you to answer throughout the workshop today. And then at a later time, if you want to print the workbook, you can. Kathleen, go ahead and throw that in the chat. We're going to give you 2 minutes to start. Thanks, Kathleen. Why do you want to write your story? So go ahead and take 2 minutes, jot it down on anything. You can type it out, write it out. Why do you want to write your story? I'm going to start the timer. We'll take 2 minutes. Okay, we'll take 30 more seconds. If you are interested in sharing your response, please raise your hand using the Zoom hand raise tool if you know how to do that. If not, you can type it into the chat. All right, we are at 2 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to share why they want to write their story? And if not, that's okay too. But if anyone would like to share, we would love to hear from you. If you don't know how to raise the hand raise chat tool, you can just type into the chat that you want to share. Okay, all right, well then we will move on. Okay, so why should I write my story? Again, many of you have, shared that you're an exclamation point. You already know it's something that you want to do, but if you are up in the air, there are so many reasons to do it, especially for those of us in the adoption constellation. One, it's really been proven that sharing and reflecting on your past and writing it down is really therapeutic and has a lot of healing benefits. It's been proven to reduce feelings of depression and anxiety. It helps you process your trauma, and Monica will talk a lot about this when she shares her story. But it just provides this opportunity for you to process what your experience has been. Not that your experience has necessarily been traumatic or negative, but it's just a really great tool for healing. It increases levels of mental clarity, it gives you a stronger sense of self and your social connections with others, perhaps people in your family. And then there's also research that shows that it's actually, good for your physical health too. So there are many really great reasons to write and share your story, or write your story and not share it. That's okay too. So today we're going to be talking about 3 different options. The first is personal therapeutic writing. This is you want to write your story for yourself, maybe for your kids, for your family, for, your best friend, but it's really meant to be kept private. It's something that you're writing as a healing tool and to share with people close in your circle. You may also choose to write to self-publish it or to publish it through a traditional publisher. It may be something that you do want to share with the entire world, and it is something that you want to get out there. And so Monica Hall, who's with us, one of our facilitators, she has published her memoir, and she's going to talk to us today about what that looks like to self-publish. And then last would be to work with a ghostwriter. So this is, you want to tell your story, you want to get it out there, or you want to keep it private, but you really don't want to do the writing yourself. You want to hire somebody. So we're going to talk about that option as well. So again, personal therapeutic writing for yourself, writing to self-publish, you want your memoir out in the world, or hiring someone to help you do the writing for you. That is what we are going to be going through today. Our next reflection question is, who is the intended audience of your written story? So if you remember, one of our takeaways today is you're going to know which of these directions you want to head in. In order to understand that, you really need to know, who are you writing for? So go ahead and take 2 minutes to jot down who is the intended audience of your written story. Can you take 1 more minute? All right, we're going to come back together. And as we do that, I just want to share some comments in the chat. Jackie wrote she wants to write her story to be able to tell her story without getting stuck. She's not even sure what her story is, but she wants to process it to heal. And absolutely, that is one of the main reasons that you would do something like this. Sharon commented, I've already written and published one. Good job, Sharon. And I really don't plan on writing another one, but just in case, that's why she's here. That's great. Welcome to both of you. Okay, so hopefully now you know you have jotted and reflected on why you want to write your story and who the intended audience is. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Monica Hall. She's going to really share her story and talk about her writing her memoir.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm just kind of curious, how many of you actually have read my memoir, Practically Still a Virgin? If you have, just raise your hand. Okay, I can only see one. I know Patricia has, Kathleen. Okay, so some of you've heard all these things before, but so my story in short is that I was adopted out of a foster home in Canada in 1957. My biological mother was obviously in trauma and relinquished me. And I was in a foster home for 3.5, 4 months. Don't know really much about that, what happened, where I was, if I was in one foster home. I just know that when my parents went to pick me up, there was, I don't know, a bunch of babies there. I've got notes, but 10, a lot of babies, and one that was very sick and not intended to live. So there was one woman who was a nurse who was caring for all the babies. And so I was adopted and taken to Anchorage, Alaska, where I grew up. And this was in 1957. So, things were different back then in the old days. It wasn't even a state in 1957. It didn't become a state until 1959. So, and it was a place where people went to start new, or to, there was a lot of, it's like the Wild West, there wasn't a lot of law, there was a lot of opportunity and such. And my father was an entrepreneur and a very sick man, emotionally, mentally. It was just, they should never have adopted. They should never have been allowed to adopt. They probably would never today be allowed to adopt. But they did. They got me, and I was raised in a house with my mom. She was a stay-at-home mom. I had her all to myself until we adopted my brother out of Canada. He and I are not biological. We don't look at all alike. We're nothing alike. And I'm nothing like my parents either. And so I didn't really identify the non-identity. I just didn't know that I didn't have identity. But I do know that from a very young age, I was really anxious to be loved, just anxious to be, accepted by kids, have friends, have people look up to me or like me, not reject me. And so there was a lot of dysfunction in my house, to say the least, and some trauma. And about the time I hit puberty, my father was interested in me in a way that a father shouldn't be interested in their pubescent daughter. And there was some definite physical abuse and some major emotional abuse, gaslighting. And I had I had a lot of trauma, and I didn't see it as trauma. That's the weird thing, you don't have anything to measure it by. Like this was my life. This was normal. Everything that was going on was normal. I didn't really compare myself to my neighbors or my other family or my friends. And most kids back then, we didn't really talk about that kind of stuff. We didn't talk about what was going on at home. Maybe it was the times, maybe it's just the way kids are. They don't know any different, right? And so my mother dropped me when my brother was adopted. He was very high need, emotionally high need. And and that's when I believe my father swooped in and made me his little, perfect child. I felt like I was praised by my dad, and I love my father, still do today. He'd be 100 and I don't know, 110 right now or something if he were still alive. But I ended up, sneaking out my window and having a lot of issues as a kid, especially as a pubescent teen. I had a lot of trauma at home, and how I dealt with that is by acting out. My brother was the one that was, did everything right according to my mother. He was mama's boy, and I went the opposite way. And I ended up sneaking out my bedroom window all the time, mostly just to go to the midnight movies, hang out with friends, get high, take LSD, things like that. And my bedroom window had a lot of activity. It's in and out of there was a worn spot on the wood there underneath my window. Nobody noticed, but the neighbors all knew I was sneaking out because it doesn't get dark in the summer. Like, it's like Mary Monica sneaking out her window again. And in the winter it was dark, for 6 months, and that was normal to us. We didn't matter if it was winter, we'd go where we wanted to go. So anyway, one night I did sneak out my window and I got raped, sexually assaulted. Sorry, trigger warning, I should have said. And I was a virgin. We were a very strict Catholic family. And suffice it to say, I was locked up in the house for 6 months, and my parents took me to Catholic Charities, and I was told that, adoption was normalized in my family. I mean, my brother was adopted, I was adopted, nobody was related to each other, but I wanted that baby more than anything because she was my only blood relative. And I ended up relinquishing, and there's a whole lot of story in between all of that, and not all of it's trauma. I had some fun back in the day. But what happened is when I decided to write a memoir, I'd never really intended to. I think subconsciously I knew I was going to, because I have been carrying around every single thing since I've had 11 moves, I think, since we left Alaska. I've carried around all the journals that I wrote in journals when I was pregnant. I have everything documented. I have all my mother's journals. I have every little thing from the hospital, but even the wristbands. I have all the stuff that the nuns gave me. I have all my appointment books back as early as 1973. I have my diary from 1968. I mean, I have all this stuff I've been carrying around. Why? I never went to school for writing. I barely went to school. I got learning disabilities, and I had ADD, whatever. So I never thought. But then, my kids moved out, and I have two grown children. One's 30 and one's 40. And then the daughter I relinquished who is 51. And my two children I raised were gone, and my daughter was over. She was pregnant with my grandson, who's about now 8. And she said, "Mom, you should write a memoir." And I had thought about it, but it was just so much jungled up stuff. There was just so much, and I didn't want to necessarily write the adoption story. Interesting, right? My daughter says, "Mom, it's so interesting. You were adopted and you found your family. You gave up you had Mary, and you had to give her up for adoption. You found your family and you found Mary. People would be fascinated." And I thought, okay, but that's not really what I wanted to write. Interesting. It was all the other stuff that I couldn't figure out. All the reoccurring dreams I was having, the things that didn't make sense in my family. The way I guess I really needed to figure out it. I had a lot to figure out if you've read my book. And I think that is what really prompted me. And I'm gonna close it down with this, in that I started writing because I wanted to figure it out. And then as I was writing and figuring it out, and I worked with a developmental editor, then I started posting on my website, monicahall.com, essays, kind of like little, just to get something out, And I worked with a developmental editor, and I would post these essays and I put them across Facebook, and people started sending me their personal stories, like really personal things, secrets that they had never told anybody. And I realized that this was helping people heal. And ultimately, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to heal. I'd made so many poor choices in my life. I, had relationships with people that should never have been in my life. I had zero boundaries. I had no identity. I had really made a mess of my life for a long time. And now I've been 40 years sober. So, you know, obviously I went into addiction for a while. And so I kept going, and I can talk more about that later, but that's basically, and I've got a beautiful book, but I wrote probably, it's maybe just under 80,000 words. I've probably written 200,000 words because I just wrote almost everything because I needed to. So is there anything else you want me to add to that, Annie?
No, that was beautiful. And I would recommend, if you have not already, that you buy and read Monica's memoir, Practically Still a Virgin. Monica, do you want to talk about these pictures? I just realized that they weren't up while you were chatting.
Yeah, okay. Obviously. Okay, so BB, that's BM. Do you see the little rat? I was so lonely. My brother rescued little rats from junior high from the boa constrictor when they were going to feed them, and he'd bring them home, and I hid them in my room. My mother would never let us have rats, but they were my only friends. And this is one was BM for bowel movement because he went potty all the time. And then the other one was BB because he had for big balls. He had huge testicles. Okay. So this one, and he had chewed off his tail. So this one has the tail. So that's actually BB, the BM, the little one. Yeah, obviously I was a child. I'm naming them after bowel movements and testicles. I mean, it kind of shows how young I was and emotionally, right? And here I'm probably 8 or 9 months pregnant. You can see the crucifix behind me. We were Catholic, and my little rat on the disaster area. I mean, that was, you know, kind of cool in the 70s, right? But really, this is a literal picture. This is a metaphor, this whole picture for me and what I was about. And then the memoir picture is that's my 17th high school reunion. I mean, high school graduation when I moved here to California. I lived next door to the school where I graduated. I was only here my senior year, and I didn't smile. I had relinquished a child a year before. All I wanted was to make friends and to try to forget. I chose to have her broken up like that, like shattered or confused and not really understanding what all this was. You know, there was so much I didn't understand. And, you know, in the end, now I have when I do my book signings, I have a stamp, and the stamp is that girl whole. And that is what writing my memoir has done for me. I am no longer broken up like that. And I'm whole, and I have changed how I let people in my life and who I let in my life. And I've removed people that didn't treat her right. So yeah, there's been a lot of healing that happened by this. And it wasn't an easy road. So any other questions about that?
If there are questions, we'll do them at the end. All right. I will make mine very brief. My story is nowhere near as touching and big as Monica's. As I shared, I'm an adoptive mom. My husband and I adopted our children 4 years ago from foster care. And I will be the first person to tell you that we went into being foster parents like, you know, just thinking that we were going to, you know, make such a difference in the world, and not having any idea how corrupt and how awful the foster care system is. And my entire perception of that has completely changed. Monica is one of my just most dear mentors, because she has really helped me understand the importance of you know, just transparency, openness, the importance of children, my own and others, knowing where they come from, knowing everything, answering all questions with honesty. And not only am I very cautious about doing that in my own family, but I now am really active in our community trying to educate other foster and adoptive parents. And, you know, I'm not always that popular with other local foster and adoptive parents because I'm really very passionate about that. And so I do want to just be open and honest that sometimes when I'm in a room with adoptees and birth parents, I get uncomfortable, but I want to be my true self and be very honest with you about who I am and how I'm feeling. And it's important to me that you all know that, because that's an important part of my story. So my children were born in 2020, 1 month before COVID hit. And when our adoption was finalized, we spent 18 months working with mom to try to, make it work out. Our hope was that they were going to be able to reunify. And unfortunately, that was not the case. She lives about an hour away from us. And when the adoption was final, I really wanted to capture the story. I've always been a writer. It's something I've always loved to do. I wanted to capture their story because I knew that eventually there would be many questions, and I wanted to do it when it was fresh, right? I wanted to do it when it had just happened. And as I started to write, I'm like, who am I to write this, right? Who am I to write the reality of why they were placed in my home? And this is their mom's story. This is their dad's story. And so I really struggled with that, but I also knew that it was going to be up to me to share this with them. And so I flew out to Nashville and I went to a writer's workshop for people who were having a hard time writing about hard topics. And I spent this weekend just writing it all out and really processing through some of the ways I was feeling about it and how do you talk about someone else's trauma. And anyway, it was really a great weekend. But from that, I really walked away being like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people be able to write about hard things and be able to tell their story in ways where there's shame and there's trauma and there's just hard things to write. And so that's what I'm doing for the last 4 years. I've been helping people write their story. And so, it's just interesting with this audience that this is really what led me to become a professional writer, was helping people put into writing their adoption stories. And then Monica and I just met by chance. And here we are now together, facilitating, hosting writers retreats together, and working together with the Constellation to help people write their stories. So that is my story. And I will turn it back over to Monica for our next reflection question. Monica, I don't know if you want to add anything to my story.
I kind of do want to add something, just a little something. So how we met, this is crazy, right? So I know this young woman who's probably not young because she's probably 40-ish now, but that's young to me, right? And a number of years ago, I saw her at an event, but I've known her for a while, and she told me how she was excited that she was going to adopt, and she knew my story. And so after the event, I pulled her aside and, we had a conversation, and that was that. I don't know, 5, 6 years later, she reaches out to me and says, we are having and I had known that she adopted because I see her on social media and I run into her. And she said, we're having a foster and adoptive mom retreat. Would you like to speak and tell your story? I'm like, sure. I mean, I speak all the time, right? So no problem. So I'm at this retreat and I'm sitting at a table with a kinship parent, a grandmother that was raising her grandchild, a foster girl who was probably in her 20s, told her story and how her birth mother now is her hero and so in love with her birth mother. She just glowed when she talked about her. And of course, she wasn't raised by her, but she was just glowing. And, that's how I felt about my parents, my birth mother too, even though I never met her. And so then I told my story. And I don't know, maybe it was 10 minutes. I don't know how long it was. But right before I was introduced by this woman, and Annie happened to be there, and this adoptive mom that had invited me. And she said, when I first told Monica that I was going to adopt, she told me some things that made me very angry. And I went home and I was mad. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I didn't know that. I don't have a filter, right? And so, and I'm passionate about this, right? So, and she said, but then I went home and I realized what she said. It's about the kids. It's about the kids. It's not about me as an adoptive parent and my feelings. It's about the kids. You know, I said something like, make sure that you have photographs of the birth parents, even if they're not safe to be around, that you never speak poorly about them. These kids are going to want to connect or feel connected to their parents. These are their biological parents. And so after that, Annie reached out to me and she said, I mean, we've had what, 2 words there or something. And she said on social media, do you have anybody helping you with your book launch? I'm like, no, like, that's a whole nother section we could talk about. And I thought my daughter might, but she says, I can do that. I go, well, how much would you charge? She goes, oh, I won't charge you. And I mean, she took care of everything, you guys. She did the social media stuff. She created all the swag and all the stuff and the party and helped me. I mean, everything. It was so incredible. I was overwhelmed. You know, just the story itself, it was just overwhelming. And yet, so that's how we got to be friends. And she wanted to do this because she was so touched by what I had said. And she started feeling really worried and frightened about her children not knowing their birth family. And, you know, under her circumstances, it's not safe. And, you know, we've had many conversations about that because there's things we can't control that are just destiny, but we can still learn to say the right thing so that we don't cause more trauma to our kids. So that's how we met. All right, I'm done.
Thanks, Monica. Okay, and I think you're doing this reflection question.
So with a little bit of what I said, and those of you that have read my book and you know that how transparent I am on my story. Of course, I didn't write everything. How do you think that your life might change if you write your story? I mean, are you comfortable with the world reading that if you were to publish? And what would you want to say? What would you not want to say? I think that's something that is very personal to everyone. Everybody's wired differently. So take a few minutes here and really think about, is this something you would be comfortable sharing with the world through publishing, even your family, maybe not publishing, but your family, your children, so they would have their history. Yeah, give it a minute. You want to take care of that, Annie?
Yes, I'll start the timer now. 2 minutes. Okay, we'll take 1 more minute. Okay, we're going to come back together. I never want to put anyone on the spot, but if anyone wants to share, feel free to come off mute and share. Sharon, I don't know if you want to read what your comment was out loud or.
That's fine. I always journaled anytime anything happened to me, and I would after my daughter found me, my life changed so completely that I wanted everybody to know if she called me, if I got a card in the mail. And the first day, of course, I called everybody in the whole world. But I was just writing it all down, and I'd send emails to my family, and I'd say, you won't believe what happened today. And they finally said, I hope you're saving all these emails because the whole world needs to see them. So
Thank you for sharing. That's great.
not unusual to other birth mom stories. So, but that's what started it all.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to share anything? All right. Okay, well, let's take a look at one of the first methods that we discussed, which was personal therapeutic writing. So as I shared earlier, this really means you're writing for yourself. You're maybe writing it to pass down to future generations for your family with no intention of publishing. It's a lot less pressure, right? Because it's not something that necessarily the whole world is going to see. Not everyone can just buy it on Amazon. Your audience is a little bit more, you have more control over your audience. And it's funny, Sharon had just mentioned journaling, because this could just be as simple as journaling, right? Waking up and writing for 5 minutes a day. Or it could be, writing a 200-page book, right? It's very flexible what this looks like. You have a lot of control over the structure of it. Is it in chapters? Is it just literally page after page after page? It could be and should be an ongoing process. It may be something that you choose to do, for the rest of your life, or maybe you're going to just write it this year and you're going to be done, that's fine. But you really have a lot of control over it, and it can evolve over the years what that looks like, right? Because it's a very personal practice. I think if we look back at the last reflection question, it's really important that you understand who's going to be reading your story, because one of the things that Monica and I have talked about before, where there were things that happened in her life that she didn't put in her story because she'll probably write about them later on, but it was just too much, right? It was too painful. So there are, of course, some things that you may or may not want to include based on who your audience is, but it's really important that you're very clear on who's going to read your writing, because that may, alter in either direction what's included. So I think if you walk away from today, Monica's going to share a lot about publishing, and you're like, oh no, I don't want to publish my book. I don't want to do this. I don't want the whole world to read it. I hope that you take away that there's still so much value in doing it for yourself and doing it for your family. And these are the 5 kind of tenets I stand by when I work with my clients. One, it's so important to pass things down, right? It's so important that those who live beyond you have this information, your story, they understand your values, the traditions in your family. It's so important to pass that information down. And if you don't do it, no one's going to do it. It really gives meaning to your story, right? You all are in this group and attending this conference because you have a lived experience it's a big one. And it's important that you're able to give meaning to that and to have that really impact other people as, time goes on. Giving your heirs a sense of where they came from. It's really important that helps others develop their identity too down the road, knowing where they came from. And then the healing. And that's a lot of what Monica talked about. It's really therapeutic, and it will really help you process through your life and your story. And then finally, just giving your life continuity, right? We're not all going to be here forever, but our story should be. And so, it's a priceless gift to give to others to be able to pass on your legacy. So just be thinking through that. If you decide that you're not going to self-publish, you're not going to traditionally publish, please don't let that be the end of your passion for telling your story, because it's important that you do that, even if nobody ever sees it or it's not published into the world. All right, our next reflection question: how do you think your life might change after you write your story? And we'll just take 1 minute for this. But if you were to write your story, regardless of who your audience is, think about who your audience is, what might change in your life. We'll take 1 minute. All right, let's come back together. So in just a second, Monica is going to start our pretty extensive section on publishing, self-publishing. One thing I want to note is that there will be a copy of the slide deck that will be posted onto the portal. I say that because their slides are a little bit heftier than what you've been looking at. There's a lot of information on them. So don't worry about writing them all down. Take your notes as you'd like, but you'll have access to the slide deck afterwards. And be sure to jot down any questions you have, because we will have time at the end for questions. All right, Monica, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Annie. All right, so there's a number of different ways. If you want to self-publish, that's one of the ways. That's what I ended up doing in the end. That's not how I originally intended to do it, but that's where I ended up. And how I did it is I got a developmental editor, and it was kind of a series of weird events that occurred because I started writing, just, it was really awful. I had 2 basic essays of that were the things that were really traumatic or things that had happened that I needed to write about first. And so I was getting a a resume redone, and my the resume lady that that one of my coworkers had used, I mentioned to her in an email that I had I was writing a memoir, and she said, "Oh, well, I'm a developmental nonfiction editor, creative nonfiction." I'm like, "What was that?" Like, I didn't even really know what that was. So I started sending, like I said, I didn't go to college for writing, and I sent her some pieces, and she'd send them back, and helped me develop them and dig. I could have sworn she was a therapist because of the questions she asked, but that's just how they're trained. She was a former college professor. That's how they're trained. So that was really helpful in my writing. In fact, I couldn't have done it without her. In the DIY process, there you have to hire these people. So I paid for her services. I don't know if it was 40 or 60 bucks an hour, but basically it was the best therapy I've ever had, and expensive. I spent a lot of my life savings on it. But of course, you don't have to probably do the extent that I did. Then I had to hire a copy editor. So once I had my manuscript done and cut down to a publish a size that a traditional publisher might want, which is about 80,000 words, same as make a novel. And because I want it to be something that's not too heavy, and I wanted it to be tight, I had to hire a copy editor. So that copy editor would take this piece that was already edited. I'm thinking it's perfect. And the copy editor went through the entire thing and made some changes, footnotes, that made sure everything was, anything that was a quote or anything that was backed up, it was all legit. And then I had to have a layout designer, and she was referred through the copy editor. So the developmental editor, by the way, the one that I ended up with, I live in Sacramento. I was raised in Alaska, where most of my story is. And I didn't know where this woman was. It was online. She was in Wisconsin. Okay. The developmental editor. I look on her website after a bit, and I realize where she got her master's degree. University of Anchorage, Alaska. So she had known and knew the background of Alaska. She'd worked on some of the old timers work, because it was a crazy place in Alaska during the oil boom years. What are the chances of that, right? Like everything was, synchronicity was there, right? So the copy editor was referred by her. She says, if I wrote a book, she is the best copy editor, use her. So I did. Where did she went to college, university, but they were roommates. So she knew my story. Okay. Then she got me into a layout designer. This was a woman in her, I think she was in her 80s. She's in Arizona. She's published a number of books. She was the coolest lady. We did so much Zoom. She read my book. She was passionate about it. And we laid out the book so that all the pages were there for the self-publish, for Ingram Spark, which I can talk a little bit more about, for Amazon, for Kindle, and all the all the online or books that were digital. And then I had to hire a cover designer. So I wanted to, I mean, it's expensive, you know, but I knew that the cover was going to be so important. It was the first thing people see. And at this time, I mean, I just wanted it to look good. And the way I'm wired, I'm kind of a perfectionist. So I found a cover designer that I loved his work. I drove him nuts. They're partners. I swear to God, you guys. I have so many changes, and it finally ended up with something I love. And that's what I needed to do. I needed to love it. You know, even if I wasn't self-publishing or publishing at all, I needed to love it. And I love my cover. You could do a vanity press. Now, a vanity press is, I figure if I were to make, I've got it written up here, my cover was 1,700. My editor was 2,400. The layout designer, the book was 1,700. And then I had to hire a proofreader. So that proofreader was I outsourced that through the editor and the final copy editor. And it was, I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't really talk to him. I knew the date that I wanted to launch. And so at the end, when I got this proof back, now the proof is like, it's supposed to be perfect, right? When I got the proof back, my copy editor, who had been roommates with my developmental editor, said, "Oh, that was a man that did it, that did the final." She goes, "Oh, I forget his name. James thought your story was very interesting. He's an adoptive father." I'm like, no kidding. What are the chances? Like, he brought, you know, there's something for everybody in this book, right? And so it was all very, so I spent 1,700 for the book cover, 2,400 for the developmental, for the copy editor, 1,700 for the layout, to lay out the book in digital and print form, 2,000 for the proof. And then that is not including the developmental editor that I worked with for 7 years. But she taught me to write. I'm a good writer. I learned. I went to college basically with her. And but so you're looking, I need to make about $7,800 to break even just on the publishing. Now, if you go with a vanity press already has a team in place. They have all those people already, they already know what they're doing. You pay them, you have less control, don't have as much control over your cover. You don't have control over what's in the book as much as what's not, but it's about 10 grand, give or take. So it's pretty close, but you don't have to learn the wheel like I did. I had to reinvent the wheel. And then you can go with a small publisher, like a private publishing press, and they'll do the bill. But then again, you don't have as much control, but it's cheaper. So, because they pay. So self-publishing, it's expensive. I mean, that was, especially if you did it the way I did it. I mean, I wanted it to be the quality of a traditionally published book. That was important to me. And so with a traditional publisher, you may receive an advance once you sign with them, but you first have to get an agent. Okay. And so you have to have either or both a query letter or a book proposal. So if anybody's ever run a business, and I've had a few businesses, I've had to do a business plan. That is, you tell them everything that you're going to do, exactly how it's going to lay out, all your marketing, all of that is all laid out in advance with how much it's going to make. Everything's there, right? It's a nightmare. I've done a few of them. I hated it. So initially I was going to try to traditionally published. I really wanted to legitimize my experience in a sense for me, because I had such low self-esteem regarding my lack of education and the struggles that I had with school. But there was a process that happened through the writing where I no longer feel inadequate in that way. I don't know what happened, but I'm really changed. My self-worth, my self-esteem. I figured things out. And so at the end, I just wanted to let it go, right? But with a traditional publisher, you would write a query letter. Now, a query letter is, in fact, I listen to a ton of podcasts. I listen to an awful lot of YouTube. I really did my research. I talked to other people. I'm one of those that wants to figure things out. Like I said, I've had a number of businesses. I just figured them out. I never went to school to do it. I just figured it out. It's the way I'm wired. So with a query letter, you have to have this letter written as such a structure that it would, when that agent gets it, they go, wow, send me the first chapter or send me the full manuscript. So you've got to write it like, you give them just enough interiority, you give them just enough to get their wet their whistle. You don't give them too much, but you let them know that you've got something that's, it's like on Netflix, they'll show you, or the trailer, they show you just the good stuff, but not enough. They just wait. So that's what and there's a way to write that's a whole learning process of getting a query letter and then finding the agents to send them to. Once that agent, and you find an agent, hopefully it's the right fit for you, they help you to look at that, that book. Sometimes they'll suggest that you make changes. And it just depends on the type of agent you get. But generally they think, okay, their job is to go sell that book to a publisher. They don't get paid until they find a publisher. So they want the people that their query letters look good, that looks like they know what they're doing, that they're easy to work with, that they're not too picky, and that they think they can sell. And so they take that book and they shop it to publishers. Now, this is a long process. And that's one of the reasons I didn't go there, because my book's good enough to be traditionally published. It would have taken time. I would have lost some. I may not have gotten the cover I wanted. They may have taken out some of the things that I wanted in my book. That is so important to me because adoption is so complex. And the narrative in, our world is adoption so wonderful. I wanted to tell my story. I didn't want to tell people. I wanted to show people. So it was so important that I had control over that. And so I did end up, self-publishing because I just didn't want to take the time. It might have taken me a year to get an agent. It might have taken me another year to shop it and find a publisher. And then that publisher now can change it any way they want. I didn't want that in the end. And really the main thing, I didn't care what you thought of me anymore. I didn't give two bits if you thought I was stupid or smart. I felt enough finally finishing that book and seeing the parts that I wasn't at fault and seeing my part in the decisions that I made and owning that. It was just a huge, huge shift in my awareness and my self-esteem. So the average self-published book sells about 200 to 250 copies. Okay. So on Amazon, I make about $5 a book. I didn't do it for the money. I've sold maybe 600 or 700 books. That's good. It's a lot, but I'm also really active on social media and I did all the things that we're going to talk about. But if you want to make money, you need to do so I'm going to go over this really quick. So I talked about a query letter to get the agent on a book that is not fiction, like it's a nonfiction book, especially if it's a book that's teaching about a subject. Or maybe your book, you just have an idea and it's not completely formed. They're going to want you to write, in essence, a business plan. And it's called a book proposal. And it's like 30 pages. And it lays out every chapter, what it's going to be about. It's, your marketing plan. It is so in depth. And I started that and I just said, screw it, I'm going to self-publish. I just didn't want to deal with it. I couldn't, like, come on, let's just move out of this. And so the thing with self-publishing and social media is absolute, it's a must if you want to sell books. So 8 years ago, when I started writing in 2016, I'd already had, I was on Facebook, but I thought, wow, I got to have a website. And I need to start garnering people. And this was right. I just started listening to a couple of podcasts that were new back then. And I didn't realize there was a whole adoptee community. At that time, I still wasn't connected with the birth mother community, but I started listening and I started connecting to people, and I started growing my Facebook, and eventually I got an Instagram and started growing that and working it and learning how to do it. So my daughter's an influencer. She's 40. She's great. She does not help me at all. At all. Damn it. I mean, she's so good. And she goes, Mom, you got to figure it out. And I mean, I was trying to really figure out how to do all these great posts and all this stuff when my book launched so that people would get my book. And I'm having to learn this at the last minute. So don't wait till the last minute on how to learn how to do this, or hire somebody to do this for you. A content creator. That's another thing that you can do. They'll know how to do it. And Annie helped me with some of that, because it's like being in the box. Like, I'm in the box of my story and my reality. I don't see from outside looking in and what other people might want to see to garner attention. You know what I mean? It's like when I had a skincare line. I'm telling everybody, because this is me, what the ingredients are, what they do, how they work. People don't give a crap about that. They just want to look pretty. Right? So it's really helpful to have somebody that can see outside the box. So social media is a must. Start connecting on Facebook with other people that are adoptees. So I found an adoptee and I looked at their friends, and I could tell that they're part of adoption. So I started collecting all these adoptees. So I had my personal page that has 5,000 friends. I'm just, that's the most you can have. I started an author page, Monica Hall author. And then I started putting more of everything that I put on my Facebook, and all those posts that I put, they went into the social media, and I started gaining more people, and people would start emailing me and giving me their personal stories. So that started growing. I'm at about 2,500 on my author site. On my Instagram site, that was the one that's, because it's photos, right? And mine's not pretty. It doesn't have presets like my daughter does. I mean, I'm 67 years old, okay? I'm trying, but I've done a pretty dang good job. And I've got, I don't know, 15,500 followers. And because it's connected to my Facebook. So every time I post on social media, it goes to my Facebook. So that's a must. Also, you need to have a marketing plan and use all the platforms. So my LinkedIn isn't great. My social media and Facebook and is good, but you need to also understand how they work, the algorithms work. So think about this. And I've been very careful. So through all the things, all the political stuff, all the COVID issues, everybody has opinions. I did not, and I have mine, okay? And I have my views, but I did not want to ever put anything on social media that was going to make someone uncomfortable. I mean, I put some stuff out there, I'm very transparent about my experiences, but I never comment on a political post of a friend. I never comment on any of the stuff with COVID, whether, if I did or didn't get, the immunization or whatever. I didn't put anything. I never commented. I only commented on things that were happy and things that, because the algorithms will give you more of that. So if I do something about hating Trump or loving whatever, I will get more of that. So I wanted to build it on people that were in the adoption community, that were working through their trauma, people that wanted to heal, people that were positive, people that were doing things to make the world, and their own lives better and their families better. So that's one of the things about the algorithms. Marketing plan. So I was so dead set on publishing my book on my 40th sobriety birthday. And I wanted to do that, which was March 21st, because it was like my gift to me. I was sober, clean and sober for 40 years is a huge deal. I mean, a month is a good deal, right? But 40 years was huge. And so I had the date set. What I should have done had I have known better, because I was doing all the publishing myself. If I had somebody else doing that, I could have done this myself or hired a publicist which I didn't do. So the marketing plan is a huge thing. You can do that through looking at YouTube. There's many ways to go about it. There's people that can help you with that. But a book launch, when you're going to have a book launch, if you're going to do a publicist or reach out to for editorial reviews, it has to be 6 months before your book publishes, and it has to be completed. You want to know about a book tour. I did a book tour in Alaska. I set that up myself, but I have not done one in Sacramento, which is ridiculous. So my book, I just overwhelmed, right? Readings at libraries, reach out to the libraries, and book clubs are your friend. But if you belong to book clubs, it's easier, right? And there's ways to get into book clubs that I haven't really done, but I intend to. Editorial reviews. So these are reviews that are sent out 6 months in advance. And that is so that you'll be legitimized by, and it has to be a good book. It has to have all the things. So you want to submit that final work 6 months in advance before publication. The publicist thing I didn't do. I didn't really know I could do that. You have more cred if you have a publicist. If I'm out there telling people how great my book is, I sound like I'm, not, like I'm not legit. And I've done a good job of that, doing my own publicity, but it's a lot of work. A pre-sale strategy I did not do, again because I had that date set, but when I do it again, because I have a second book that didn't fit in the first one, and it's a lot of the stuff that I really wanted to write and figure out, and it reads more like a mystery, and it's it's good. I can hardly wait to get my fingers on it, but I'm marketing my book. So if I had a publicist, then I would be able to work on that second book, and that would have been a good strategy, or somebody that that can help. But the street team and the art copies are your advancce review copies. So remember that layout lady, she had the digital form of my book done that was, that went on the Kindles and the readers. That I sent out. I also got I paid for, and it was not very expensive, book funnel. A book funnel is a little piece of software. I uploaded my art copy, this final copy, and I put together a list of 100 people that would agree to read my book and then post a review on Amazon and Goodreads when it hit, because that is key to have reviews on your book. So I really spent time on this, and many people do it and they don't do it. It's a hard job. So what I did is I just made a spreadsheet of everybody I friggin' knew. Like everybody I knew, anybody that knew, anybody in the adoption community, anybody that I had communicated over social media, and it kept growing. Like people I used to work with, people I went to high school with, people I went to elementary school with, people that were in my recovery community, people in the adoption constellation. I mean, it just kept growing, and I put it on a spreadsheet, and on it, next to the spreadsheet, I wrote their email address and their phone number. Okay, so this is a strategy. I uploaded that list of emails into this book funnel and my book, and it would send this out, that it was just to them. It gave them the exact date that they needed to read it by and when they needed a post, and all the information was in this. And in it, I could see who opened it and who didn't, who downloaded my book, who hadn't. Now, remember, I had their phone numbers. So I text everybody, because a lot of younger people don't read their emails. Hey, I see you didn't open it. Do I need to send it again? Hey, it doesn't. And then I gave them an example of what they could say. I gave 10 examples of what they could say in a review. Okay. Don't do this. Don't copy it. Use your own words, but this is something to help you get started. And then when I saw them, starting to do the reviews and how they were to say the reviews I received an advance copy, because obviously on Amazon, they're not a tradition. They didn't buy the book, it'll show that they had purchased the book. So, and then I micromanage that. I don't know. I've got like 117 5-star reviews, and I have a few. I think I had a couple haters, but whatever. So that would be a pre-sale strategy, and I would if you could do a publish list, that would be great. But write down book funnel and do a couple of YouTube videos and learn about that, because it was cheap and it really was a nice way to do it. It was very professional. And then, so I did Ingram Spark, which is a global book distributor where the traditional bookstores buy. Okay. And so that was a bit of a challenge. I did a lot of YouTube videos to figure out how to do it, but they wanted a little different format than Amazon, and I uploaded it into there. Now they're an on-demand printer and publisher. So the cover of that book looks a bit different. It's a little brighter than the Amazon. But that's what, and I did my research on the categories in Amazon. I watched lots of YouTube videos, because your categories can make or break you. If you want to be #1 in memoirs, you're not going to beat out, Elon Musk if he wrote one. I haven't read it, or anybody else. And a virtual assistant is so great. Virtual assistants, they work for maybe $8 an hour, and they can do, just a ton of stuff for you in 1 week, like just a few hours. Not a whole 8 hours, just they're like smart and young, and they work twice as fast, probably 5 times as fast as I do. So that's the self-published portion. Is there anything else, Annie, that you thought that I didn't get to?
No, it was very thorough. I wanted to add something about the virtual assistant. When Monica says they're $8 an hour, it's not, it's better than it sounds. I've worked with a virtual assistant several years ago, and I think I paid him $10 an hour, but that actually put him through college. He lived in Nigeria, and to him that was so much money. So it may sound like, it's not like we're taking advantage of people. That was something where he was working for me like 20 hours a week and was able to like support himself and like pay for his schooling. So it's definitely a really good option out there. It's very good. Okay, we are going to go ahead and talk briefly about ghostwriting. So if you're sure that you want to write your story, but after hearing all of this, you're like, man, I just don't know if I have the time, or I want to get it done more quickly, or I don't want to spend 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. I don't want to hire a developmental editor, any of that. One option that you have is to hire somebody to write your story for you. And of course, they would do it with you. So I'll share a little bit about this just because this is something that I do. I have a client call me and say, hey, like, I really want to get my story on paper for either self-publishing or just to get it out. I want to just talk to you. I want to just talk my story. I type it out. I record them. I write the drafts. We go back and forth with drafts. It's really great if you don't have the time to write your story. If you find yourself sitting down and the words just don't come out, like, you can talk about your story, but you can't actually write them, or you're so stressed out about how you're writing that you just don't do it at all. Sometimes you can hire someone just to help you write the outline, right? I have people who say, well, I want to do the writing, but I don't even know where to start. And so you can sit down with a ghostwriter, and you can, they can help you create the structure, okay, what are the chapters going to be? What am I going to put where? What order should it go in? And, these are people who do this professionally. And so it's easier for them. What could take you months to do, they could do in a 1-hour session. And then you can get through your writing if you wanted to do it yourself. It's also, I think, if you want other people's input. So let's say, you want to write your story and you really want your sister to be involved, but it's too hard for you to do that work with her. The ghostwriter then can go ahead and chat with her and get her insight and put it into the story for you. So there are some reasons that, it might be beneficial, even if you want to write your own story, maybe like, hey, can someone just help me get through to these people and get their contribution? And it's a skill, like Monica said at the beginning, she couldn't write, and now she's a really good writer, and she's glad that she did it, right? She's glad she took the time. But some people don't have the time. And so if it's just like your story's not going to get done if you have to do it yourself, then it may be worth hiring someone to help you. It just makes it a lot more manageable. And if you hire a professional, they can help keep the story consistent and written in a way that, that flows. So something to consider. It's not something for everyone. But if you really want to get your story out in the world and you don't want to do it yourself, that's always an option.
Hey, can I say something really quick about that? Just
yeah,
short. So when my daughter came over and she said, Mom, I think you should write a memoir. I'm like, okay. And so a couple days later, my girlfriend came over, and she had just lost her beloved pet, and she was crying, and we were talking, and I said, hey, do you know a ghostwriter? And she, I told her, she knows my story. She goes, why don't you do it yourself? And I'm like, she goes, haven't you written before? I go, yeah. Yeah, just in my journals. I mean, I'd done, work writing, of course. And I pointed over to the bookshelf, and there was my old journals, the cloth covered journals. And I pulled one out, see? And I'd never opened them. And she opened it instead of started reading out loud. I'm like, oh, it was like Pandora's box. But that was how I originally started. She goes, Mom, Monica, you can do it. And I'm glad I did. But I initially was going to hire a ghostwriter because it just seemed overwhelming.
All right. So now that we've heard and we've discussed three options, one is just, personal therapeutic writing, self-publishing or traditionally publishing, but publishing and putting it out into the world. And then maybe hiring someone to help you. Let's take 1 minute to just journal, which method feels like the best way for you to write your story. Where are you leaning now that you've heard us speak about different options? And then, like I said, we'll take about a minute. Go ahead and, put in the chat if you're comfortable, what you're feeling right now, what you're thinking. All right, we'll start 1 minute. All right, we will come back together. Is there anyone who would like to share what they're feeling right now if you're headed in one direction? And if not, that's okay too. All right, we will move on. So Monica is going to share a series of best practices. We put each one on a different slide, but we're gonna go through them kind of quickly. So Monica, I will turn it over to you and then we'll come back together.
Back in the day, there probably wasn't adoption competent therapists, but there are today. So I would recommend you find one. I did not do that. I wished I had. Although I think the therapy, and I had people to help support me. So, but if you can, get some therapy appointments, because anybody in the constellation is going to have some sort of trauma. Doesn't matter who you are. And you can't get out of life without trauma. So that would be something I suggest. Then also, I would suggest that you connect with others in the constellation if you haven't. I'm assuming you have because you're here on this, but there's so much I did. I listened to podcasts. I've been interviewed on many podcasts. I've read lots of books. In fact, so many of my friends have written books. I have stacks of books everywhere. I've attended a retreat, a few retreats actually, and one was an adoptee retreat early on. It was led by a therapist and a writer, and that was incredible. There's also writing retreats. There's support groups. There's support groups on social media. There's just all of those things, and know what style works for you. Like, everybody's got a different style, and mine actually changed over time. I used to write late at night, and then I burned out my adrenals. And so then I started writing early in the morning. And then I just wrote whenever I thought of something. And there were times when I actually put it aside because I couldn't get to it. And sometimes walking away for a couple of hours or a couple months really changes the process and the writing. So find a schedule that works for you.
Monica, can I add something to that really quickly? I would also, if you're not sure what that looks like, try different things. So for example, I'm like a work block person. I every Sunday I write, like I put on my calendar, these are my writing blocks for the week. I wasn't always like that. I used to wake up every single morning and the first thing I would do is write. Well, then I had kids, so it was a little bit different. But if you may want to try a set schedule, and then if you're like, this doesn't work for me, you can do it whenever. If I did it the way Monica did it, which is like, man, she would just feel something and she would sit down, I would never be able to write. So just know that there are different ways you can do it, and you might want to try a couple different styles before you settle on something.
Yeah, her work blocks I tried do not work for me at all. But we're wired differently. Like she could, like, this is what she does for this a lot of time. And I'm not that structured. So everybody's different. Do what works for you. So create a safe and comfortable space. Initially, when I would write, I was originally writing on my dining room table and with a laptop. And then I started getting neck and shoulder problems, from having my arms out and my neck. And so then I started writing in my adjustable bed, and then my neck really started bothering me because I was going forward. So I have changed all of that. Find what works for you. I have an ergonomic keyboard now. Sometimes I'll write here, and I have a special chair and a thing where my neck isn't forward because I haven't had any neck problems since I stopped writing, and I need to start writing again. So join a writers group or attend a writers retreat. That is incredible because you're with other people that are doing the same thing. They have the same, and the group helps each other. It builds on yourself. You can talk about or just listen to what other people are saying about their process. Some people will actually do a little bit of a reading. There's so many of those. You can find them on social media. You can find them on Facebook. You can find them through AKA and all the other outlets that we have through the constellation, and a mentor or friend or a few. So initially when I started writing, I had my friend Kelly in Alaska who could see things that I couldn't see. And my next door neighbor, if you read my book, Paula, she didn't have trauma and she couldn't see things the way Kelly could. But she couldn't really help me, but she was supportive. And my mom initially was really supportive on some of the real heavier content that I had kept secret. But then at the end, my mom had passed and my book changed so much because my mother was no longer alive, and more was revealed that I couldn't see while she was still alive. So I've had a number of friends, also people in the adoption constellation. I know a number of authors that support each other, that know that they're writing, and they'll work back and forth and talk to each other. So you have the access to that, and give yourself grace. Don't make it like it's not a race. It is, like I said, sometimes, and I'm type A, and I'm a go-getter, and I didn't do it this way on my writing. I knew that I needed to take the time to get to what I needed to get to for my own healing. And I sometimes had to walk away from it, not because it was too much, sometimes it was, but because I just couldn't get there. And like I'd be washing dishes or picking weeds, and all of a sudden, oh, that was it right there. That's it. And then at the very end, I had Annie, and I had another woman who is had a pretty traumatic childhood, and she's a writer. She's really deep, and we'd sit and talk. And there was parts of my manuscript that I just couldn't get to, and we'd walk. I could talk it. See, I'm an extrovert, so most writers are introverts, and all of it comes through, and they can feel me. It's so in layers. So I had to have people that helped me walk through it, and I could talk through it, and then I could get through it. So everybody has got their own process there. Self-care plan in place. I have a spa. I have doggies. My brother now lives with me, and I get massaged once a week. I also take time for myself now, where I didn't feel that, I was raising kids and things. Now I have, I've done some retreats. God, those are wonderful. And even if they're writing retreats or grief retreats or adoptee retreats, they're still wonderful because you're away. So.
All right. And in your workbook, we have a page designed to help you create a self-care plan. We're not going to do that right now for time's sake, but we really encourage you to, before you start really writing, you know, all of the emotions are going to come up. It's going to be really challenging. Have a plan for how you're going to support yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually, professionally, all of the things. You can use the handout that's in our workbook. So a couple of next steps, set aside time to process this information. I know you're probably doing multiple sessions today, but you know, go out to coffee next week and just look through these slides, go through the reflection questions again after you've had time to think through them, and then just start writing. Just start doing it, make mistakes, delete things, add things. You know, we both talked a lot about joining a writers group, talk to people who have done this before. If you're interested, you know, we would love to work with you. We do have a writers retreat coming up in March. It's March 14th and 15th. March 14th is National Write Your Story Day. So we're doing it that weekend. It is virtual. And so we would love to have you. It is a women's retreat, but we also do, Bruno, and if anyone else is online, we do hold other spaces for others. So we would love to work with you all if you are interested. And we do have a promo code for this that's valid for the rest of the month. So the QR code is here. If you're interested in any of that, please put your email address in the chat and we're more than happy to reach out to you with information, but we would love to have you join us for this. And with that, if there are any questions, we do have 5 minutes left. We would love to answer them.